Hello everyone, welcome back to the Humble&Brag podcast. Today we're talking about how to structure a YouTube team, and we're going to talk about 3 different stages of a company's life cycle and how to structure that team, both internally in terms of the YouTube team. There we have our resident expert in Callum, and then also to talk about how that YouTube team fits into the broader marketing structure, and that's where I will chip in with some of my ideas as well. A lot of this is pulled from our own experience of working in companies and teams of different sizes and seeing those teams and companies grow, and how the YouTube team kind of evolved within that ecosystem of teams. Yes.
I've not said anything yet.
No. What do you think? What do you think of the idea?
I think this is great. I think this is a video topic that we've been talking about doing for a while. And I think it'll be useful for people either listening on the podcast apps or on the podcast as well. I should just point out we do have a visual aid, so we'll try and be as descriptive as we can when talking about what's happening on the screen. But the visual aid is purely just to communicate this idea, because there's various stages to it. But we'll be communicative and descriptive when doing that for the people that are listening via audio only. But let's dive in. I think this is something you wanted to do for a while now.
Yeah, I just think it's something that doesn't really exist on YouTube. I think we're doing something completely original and novel, never been done before. Just because generally all the content on YouTube tends to be aimed at creators and creators growing channels, not so much at companies growing channels, and how that fits within a standard kind of marketing organization. So yeah, hopefully this will add something a little bit new to the conversation.
Definitely. So just for the people listening, maybe you want to give a breakdown of what we have on screen here, because we're looking at a little graphic, very intricate, complex graphic that you have
with many hats,
literally many hats.
So basically my idea was to have 3 phases. So you have a kind of startup to begin with, and you have a small marketing team of kind of 6 or 7 people with one marketing head, with those 6 or 7 people reporting into that head. And then typically in management, you say once you hit 7 people, you're not doing anything but managing. So you don't have any time for kind of any operational duties. So as soon as it goes beyond 7 people, then you need to start developing some kind of team structure. Otherwise you have too many people reporting to you and you just burn out as a marketing lead or as any kind of lead. So I've kind of maxed that out in this first stage, and one of those reports would be the video person. Okay, so basically you have one person for each channel, for each area of responsibility. You have one person for performance marketing, might be doing paid social, paid search, one person for social, doing all social media, all organic social media, one person for ops, so email marketing essentially, one person for editorial, so probably writing content for the blog, one person for design, so contributing, delivering, acting much as the kind of service function for basically the entire marketing team, and then marketing tech as well.
Okay.
And one of these people would be video, and that would have YouTube under the umbrella, but potentially also video for other functions, such as on-site video, maybe cutting up, repurposing video for the other social channels, all that kind of thing.
Love it.
So that would be, for me, startup, bit scrappy, first marketing team, hiring for specific functions to get them off the ground, and hopefully hiring the kind of people that then could lead and grow a team under them in the future as well, as the company grows, all being well.
Perfect.
Yes. So that's what the marketing team looks like in stage 1. Then basically what we'll do is work our way left to right on this visual. For those people listening or also watching, can describe it in words a little bit, but then you have this kind of marketing director role with a bigger organization underneath, and then you have the CMO role when then you maybe have 30 or 40 people underneath, all split into these different functions. Yes, but let's start with the marketing head. So we've got that team. When I scroll up, then you see the video person with many hats on. Yes. What does that look like for you, and what has that looked like for you? Because I know that you've filled this role yourself.
I filled this role myself once many years ago. Just about killed me. No,
still
all joking aside.
Flashbacks.
I mean, for context, for the visual aid here, we have a head with 3 different hats on it, which I think is very rich symbolism. Maybe just to quickly look at the key, we have the kind of the fedora or the sun hat as the videographer. So someone that will capture
content. I thought it was more of a
content.
sombrero.
But let's agree to disagree on this. I mean, sombrero, okay, sombrero is good. But that represents the videographer, so someone that will capture the content, plan the content, film the content, etc. Be on hand. Then we have the baseball cap, which is the editor / animator. So that's someone that would typically, ideally, take footage, add visual flair to it, infographics, information, animations, cut the footage up and be able to get that publishable content ready. And then we have the top hat, which in this graphic is the strategist. So someone that would kind of plan content, look at what the lay of the land is on the channel or the platform, with YouTube in mind here, and be able to kind of strategize and direct the content strategy and the video topics. And then lastly, we have the party hat, which is kind of this production managers with the S in parentheses, / agency, which is interesting as well.
Or agencies as well, potentially, when you get really big.
Yeah,
could be.
Agents is with the S in parentheses.
This is how CMOs talk as well.
Or would it be IES? It would be in parentheses.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so just to come back to your initial point there, sorry. So looking at an in-house team in the kind of first example, maybe more of a sort of startup sort of environment, you have the videographer. So basically we have one person, many hats. That this head in the graphic is wearing the fedora, sun hat, a baseball cap, and the top hat. And this is maybe something I can speak for a little bit. This is what I did in my first role, starting out with YouTube production and content strategy at AJ and Smart. And yeah, that basically involved planning, producing, post-producing, releasing, and refining over the space of about 2 years, I think, before it became a team of two.
Okay.
What kind of angles would you like me to cover with this? What kind of direction?
So the first one I'd be interested in is kind of what was expected of you in this role. So if you had to look at that job ad, what would have been the responsibilities? I know you could probably talk about this for hours, but if you could try and condense that down
I will try.
For the good of our viewers.
I will try.
Yeah. Then what would that look like, do you think?
So typically...
Would it weekly release? Would it be that intense?
Okay. I mean, basically I started in that role and the kind of the brief, I guess, for the role, or the target was 1 weekly release on YouTube. And I think at that time, AJ and Smart had done a really good job with the video content they put out, but they never quite, and this is something we've talked about before with CF, they'd never quite gone to that cadence of a weekly release. And looking back, I definitely maybe took the wrong approach to it, but I was also just starting out and learning, but that involved the weekly release. So you were kind of planning content, researching content, coming up with video concepts and ideas and titles and things, filming the content, and then we've also discussed post-production, so the editor animator element would take up, I would say, about 80% of the time. And then you get to the distribution, that would maybe fall more under the strategist in this instance, and that would probably take at least a day, including uploads and thumbnails and titles and all the back end on YouTube, and that would be kind of week in, week out. So I started doing this about 5.5 years ago, and you kind of rather dangerously get into this rhythm of constantly producing, constantly publishing, constantly planning and researching, and you can't really break that cycle unless you take a break from actual releases. So it was definitely a learning curve, but that's what it looked like. Yeah, it was weekly releases, but without the kind of the knowledge of maybe initially building up a backlog to stagger those releases and afford more time for planning and preparation and things like that. So yeah, that was how it started.
Let's talk about the second level a little bit. So we have the in-house team, that's this one person with many hats, and then we have the out-of-house team, so the outsourcing of anything that makes sense. What would make sense if you're this one person in a company, which is a very realistic scenario, I imagine, for people watching, then how would you improve or increase your efficiency or effectiveness as that one person in-house? Yeah,
so I mean, taking that sort of startup mindset of the weekly releases, one person doing a bit of everything at various levels, but never quite getting into a cadence of being able to maybe manage it effectively in terms of their own time and production. Then you look at this thing that you've mentioned with the out-of-house team. And in the graphic, you have the sombrero, so the videographer, and also someone with a baseball cap. So that's two people. So ideally, then you'd have someone that would capture the content and plan for the content. And then the outsourcing of that bulk of the work, that 80% of time that I talked about, could be done with a freelancer, for example. So that would really free up your initial person to do a lot more planning and a lot more impactful kind of research and development. But yeah, that would be involving freelancers, things like that, maybe external people that work on a more ad hoc basis, doing a very specific task.
Okay, so that means that someone's coming in to shoot the content.
Yeah.
And then that is farmed out to an editor to work on, and then delivered back to the in-house person. And then I guess purely as a result of subtraction here, then the in-house person is basically the strategist role.
Yeah, it morphs into that, and usually that comes with experience, because like I mentioned, it took a bit of time to find that cadence and identify the gaps and the problems, but once you've done that, you can be like, okay, well, I would be more efficient at doing X, Y, and Z. That would drive more business impact if I had, X amount of people or these kind of roles helping and supporting in specific things. And that was, for me, that was always the post-production. it was just so time consuming as well. So yeah, that would be a good example of that.
That probably answers my question then, but as a head of marketing, I'm afraid I have a restricted budget. I can only afford one of these two people.
It's the story of my life, Ed. It's the story.
We're going to have to sell the microphone, you're going to sell your laptop, I'm afraid. And then you can have one of these people. Who's it going to
be? Which of the roles I would pick? For in-house or outsourcing?
So you can only outsource to one person. We can only afford the editor or the sombrero person.
I would say I would prioritize outsourcing the editing.
Okay.
Because that way you can get someone that you don't need to be adept at videography and camera work to produce a lot of content, but you do have to have systems and processes and plugins and presets to make effective post-production. And I think if you could outsource that editing work and all the kind of the technical things with animations and B-roll that come with that, you could then focus on doing something like this where you set up one camera, a mic, have some laptops and screen recordings and just churn out content. And then the bottleneck of the post-production, then having to sit and edit all that, is gone.
Yeah. I mean, we're noticing definitely on the editing side, there are some efficiency gains, pretty huge efficiency gains on with AI plugins and that kind of thing. But still, like the time it takes to prep and shoot content is so much less than the editing side, right?
It's also kind of lighter. I think it's something that you can do like, hey, we tried this. Maybe it didn't work so much. Let's try this other thing. Whereas with editing, it's like, okay, I've got this 20, 30-minute video and to add annotations and graphics to, you kind of know how long that's going to take. And as I say, it's about 80 to 90% of the time. Yeah. So
cool. Okay, so we've talked about the marketing structure, the out-of-house team, the in-house team. One more question regarding this, and I guess this will be a question I'll repeat. How then does the video person stroke YouTube person in the company, how do they interact with the other teams that you have here? So you have performance and social and ops and editorial, design, marketing, tech, like who are you actually talking to on a daily basis or a weekly basis, do you think, and why?
Well, in that role, I think, again, depends on the size of the company and how the kind of formalities of that work. But, for example, in my first role, AJ and Smart, you just have a coffee with the performance marketing person, and he would say something like, hey, I've got these ideas for a new batch of ads. How can we fit that into your current production workflow? And then you produce maybe 10, 15, 20 new ads, vertical video, landscape video, statics, etc. In a larger company, there's probably a lot more planning that has to go into it. You have to think about campaigns. You have to think about that. Oh god, okay. But to wash over it, to glaze over it quickly, there would probably be a lot more process and planning. Maybe have tickets. Maybe try and book some scheduled production time for that. There'd be people kind of positioning and messaging and that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely in the smaller sort of scrappier. One person with all those hats environment, it would be probably more informal conversations. And then as you scale that up through the teams and the sizes of companies, it would get a bit more formalized. Okay. And it'd probably be directed by someone else that wasn't just the individuals as well. Yeah. So for example, like the marketing head or head of performance or something that would manage teams. Whereas in the smaller environment where it's just a few people, it would be much more kind of conversational. Hey, let's try this thing. If it doesn't work, we'll iterate. Yeah.
So who would you say, of those 6 other people, who would you say you're having the most contact to with performance, social, ops, etc.?
In the startup environment?
So say that the whole team is probably 20 or 30 people. The marketing team is 6 or 7. Of those people, then who do you think you're collaborating most closely with?
If I'm wearing all the hats, as in the first example, I would say probably the performance person. Or the person that's responsible for the execution of performance. Not necessarily the creative, but yeah.
And when it comes to social and kind of repurposing content, do you think there's much there? So you have the Instagram manager or the person who's basically managing Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever might be the kind of big channels for that company, depending on the industry.
Maybe this is where I speak less to my own experience because I would just do that all myself previously.
Okay.
But yeah, you would probably liaise with a social media manager then. So maybe that would be one person that would be responsible for repurposing that content or identifying clips and coming to you and saying, hey, this was really interesting. Can you cut this 2-3 minute section from that video and we'll publish it on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. Yeah. So maybe then in that case, to answer your question more cohesively, I think with performance marketing manager or someone that's in charge of the performance elements, and then with the repurposing and the content and the distribution, maybe the social media manager, assuming that those roles are in this company, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's say all of our marketing strategies are paying off, we're growing, we're able to hire, we're able to kind of formalize a structure behind the marketing team, then it could look something like this. So then we're sticking to this rule of not having more than 7 people reporting to anyone. So you have 5 people reporting into the marketing director here, You have performance with standard performance channels plus analytics. Then you have editorial, focusing on long form and SEO, so focusing on the blog, maybe also contributing to website copy as well. Then you have social. Looks pretty similar. So social media, managing distribution of all the social media content, whether that's image assets or video assets. And under that falls YouTube as well. So YouTube within the social team. And then we also have events. So this is webinars and things like that. Obviously very closely related with social media and with YouTube as well. Here, like one comment I'd make is that YouTube often falls weirdly outside what people consider social media because it has this kind of strange SEO function. Also operates as an ad platform. Obviously, you can also throw influencer marketing in there as well. So it's kind of a platform in its own right. Whereas someone who's managing Instagram is often also managing TikTok, is often also managing Facebook, etc. But YouTube often doesn't get the attention it deserves. And we discussed this in previous podcasts because it kind of falls awkwardly between teams. And this is one way of trying to solve that kind of problem of giving its own function, its own team. Then you have ops, so marketing ops and sales ops. So marketing ops managing the email marketing to the lead base, sales ops really managing the processes for the sales team and any kind of one-to-one communications with prospects. And then the creative team, and we'll touch on this a little bit later as well, which is kind of at this point serving quite a service function with design, delivering for social media, assets for social media, but also for performance marketing, all those kinds of things. Then also I would here put video and copy. And I would separate these out from, for example, the YouTube and editorial team, because YouTube team, editorial team is for me really like a distribution channel, a marketing channel that has its own metrics behind it, has its own growth targets. And with the creative team and video and copy, then they really become this kind of in-house agency to deliver primarily website assets and also performance team assets. So then they're focusing on really developing and sharpening these expertise in advertising, essentially. So it's like really the advertising team, whereas YouTube is kind of a channel-focused team. And if you don't separate those two, then I think, and this is something that we experienced as well, the focus gets so diluted that you stop being effective in either one of those two things.
Absolutely.
And yes, there's a lot that you can learn from both, but generally they'll start to kind of digress or deviate from one another as well, as the YouTube team focus is on what's really working well on that platform, and the advertising team, the in-house agency, really focus on what's working well on the website and on the performance, and they start to work very closely with performance and very closely with any kind of marketing tech team as well. Doing like A/B testing on the website, etc., trying to work out what copy's working there. I think, we'll come to what happens next in the evolution of the marketing team, because somehow at some point that deviation needs to be married again. There's a bit of a divorce, and then you need to find this resolution. You go to therapy, couples therapy, and then it all comes back together. But don't want to get ahead of myself. Can
I come in there for a second?
Yes. No, you can come in for more of this mic over to you now. This is more than a second.
I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned with the roles there and how they kind of marry with different teams. But just to touch on this graphic, because I think it's a really good graphic that represents the startup environment. I wouldn't necessarily expect a videographer or animator editor or maybe the strategist, but I wouldn't expect that one person, if you're bringing them in out of the blue, out of the cold into your company, necessarily to know anything about YouTube, right? So I wouldn't expect a videographer to be able to understand the platform, best practices, optimization, how the algorithm and the content is fed to people. And in the same way for the editor and animator. In fact, I would say definitely not. Then the strategist role, I think because we have this one hat, I think this is something I want to niche down on here in terms of the topic, but I would expect the strategist to have that. But it's very unlikely that you'll find someone with all of those traits and skill sets. So I think they can learn it quite quickly. And that's maybe why something like if when we get into filming our course, that I think would be very useful because we can kind of distill all that information down for people. But I think that's where the kind of creator economy and these individual creators and channels have the edge, because they're people that have started out on YouTube and have started editing and filming and planning their own videos, but also publishing and seeing success and iterating and doing all the strategy. So in a way, these big successful creators, and you have people like Ali Abdaal and such, would be the perfect person to fill this role, because they know how to do everything.
Absolutely.
But you're not going to afford them because they don't want to do videography or editing work anymore because that's incredibly time consuming. And I would imagine once you've had a flavor of success like that, you're making quite good money from these channels. It's something that you would outsource immediately. But in terms of like the metaphor here, they would be the perfect person for this one head, all hats.
Yeah. It's so interesting because the divide between this creator community and the kind of in-house YouTube strategist, YouTube team, it just seems to get bigger and bigger because the creators have success and then they obviously develop business around that success and they kind of go in their own direction, which then means that they're completely not incentivized to take a role in-house because they have their own thing. And then the in-house team, you kind of have to build up your knowledge within that role because there's not this kind of formalized training or anything to get into that role. And so it's like the quintessential startup within the startup, right? For all those people, those video people, when they start out. And then that creator doesn't necessarily have the understanding of everything else that goes with working in a marketing team in-house around like collaborating with other channels so that you elevate their performance as well. Like, which is always a thing, right? It's like, okay, we want to silo ourselves a little bit and focus on our channel and do our thing. But at the same time, it's like, hey, that bit of content would work really well in our blog if we just did, why not, add a video to this blog post in order to improve the performance there. But it's not so good for the YouTube. So there's a lot of kind of compromise that comes into play.
And just to carry on from that,
potentially,
as we mentioned, that the creators themselves would be great hires, could never afford them. But then the people that work in those creator ecosystems, so the videographers, the editors, will probably have a lesser extent of a marketing background than someone like a performance marketing manager or yourself, maybe like a head of marketing, CMO, that kind of person with that experience. But they would make a very attractive pool of talent to hire from. Caveat, they will not work. They will not be cheap. So they'll be cheaper than hiring the creators themselves. But they also are paid well by the creators because the creators see the value in the work that they can produce and the knowledge that they've built up. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22. The solution to this, I think, would be if you were in-house, you have a modest budget, you're looking to expand the marketing team, I would say hire a videographer and editor and set very clear expectations and goals that you want them to then completely consume knowledge on YouTube and best practices and things. And then maybe within a few months, maybe 3 or 4 months, they'll be able to build that training up and build that experience up. It will take time, but that's how you would maybe take someone that's maybe a junior or mid-level videographer, editor, and expand them into that area. And you can set very clear expectations and give them very clear benchmarks and examples. That would help. And I think maybe that's mirroring my own story there with my first role with all these hats. There was very clear, we want a video a week and we want the videos to get better. And then once you have that kind of criteria and that expectation, you work towards that. I was never obsessed when I was starting out. I was never obsessed with becoming a better videographer. Like there's still loads of knowledge gaps in my own experience with composition and filming and things. But when it comes to YouTube, I feel like I could count on one hand the number of people in Berlin, which is a city of 4 million people, that I could maybe call up and be like, hey, we need you to come in and do this. And they'd be able to do it with YouTube. One hand. 5 fingers. I don't know where that came from.
It's like some of your network thinking, am I on the hand? They're watching this and they're thinking, am I on?
Maybe you're on the hand. Maybe you're not on the hand. Maybe I have more fingers, some more hidden fingers.
A hand with 50 fingers.
Yeah, it's an AI generate. We're digressing now. Sorry, but yes, back to the original point. So
we've covered the startup phase. We covered maybe in a kind of small to medium business phase. I think to give you an idea, maybe this first phase, we're probably talking like 20, 30 people. Second phase, maybe we're talking kind of 60, 70 people. And then this final phase, I think, is probably 100 plus people for the whole company. And then let's say the marketing team makes up about a quarter to a third, maybe the whole marketing and sales organization. The commercial side of the operation makes up a third of that. So we're talking maybe 30, 40 people plus. Okay, so it's like quite serious business. Revenue is probably like at least 10 million, maybe up to 20 million plus. Okay. We're talking about 100 plus people. Obviously, depending on the industry, all those kinds of things. Yes. And here we have 2 parts of the organization. This is very, very standard. So you have the growth or kind of performance part of the marketing organization, and then you have the brand part of the organization. And here everything has been then grouped together a little bit more. So on the growth side, you have performance and ops. So they're kind of putting together the big budgets that go behind primarily Meta and Google, but can also be other channels as well. And then you have ops. So this is all the email marketing, which is still, and I think will be for a lot longer, the huge revenue driver. And very, very numbers driven, very performance driven. And then supporting whoever is then kind of head director of growth, VP of growth, whatever it might be, would be the analytics function as well, because they have to be fed data basically on a daily basis, and they have to be building dashboards, etc. They have to understand the data inside out and upside down because of the amount of money that's behind it. And then you have brand. And here, I think in my experience, when you have brand and performance, often you have this kind of dichotomy. You have a lot of conflict because you have performance saying we're driving all the sales. What are brand doing? And brand are doing like, performance is just doing anything to get those sales, and nothing is consistent, nothing is long-term, everything's short-term. And you don't get much understanding between the two. And the way that you solve that, I think, is by giving brand some responsibility for growth and performance. And you do that by giving them distribution channels, and those distribution channels are social and possibly editorial. So long form written content, SEO, etc. Making sure you're getting good traffic, making sure you're also measuring conversion off the back of that traffic. Exactly the same thing with social, making sure that they're driving results as well. And maybe a bit more difficult to measure, but you give them everything that you possibly can in order that they can measure and iterate on performance. Yes, and then also supporting that VP of brand or whoever it might be. You have the brand research and strategist as well, who's basically making sure that all the internal resources are there, so that all the messaging, everything is documented and can also always be used. If you make a YouTube video, when you're using your CTAs, when you're talking about the company, that is the same in that channel as it is on the blog, for example. Yes, so it's a much more kind of mature organization. And then in this organization, for me, YouTube sits still within the social team because there's so much collaboration nowadays between basically across all the social channels. So much of it is video led. Then you're always going to be kind of repurposing content across those social channels, or maybe shooting a little bit of extra content at the end of the YouTube video and farming that out to an editor, for example. And then also, when we were at CF, I saw a lot of synergies between, sorry to use the word, between events and YouTube because of YouTube Lives, LinkedIn Lives, all those kinds of things. There's always a lot of collaboration there. So I'd almost be tempted to group those two things together. And then social media, we had this really kind of nice function of proving the revenue attribution of social media by advertising all the kind of events that we were running through YouTube, through LinkedIn, through
Instagram
events,
stories,
all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that can be done there to really elevate the status of social within a company and really attribute revenue and really prove the impact that it's having. Yes, that was kind of long-winded, but there's a ton of potential there that most companies aren't really tapping into. And then finally, just very quickly to finish the description of this organization, then you have the creative team. And here, the difference between the creative team and kind of stage 2 and stage 3 is that this creative team is then playing a much more strategic role in determining the messaging and the kind of copy and the kind of campaigns that are running. So they're really starting to work not only on this kind of always-on evergreen approach as a startup would, but they're also starting to look into what are the prevailing trends, what are the kind of insights, the key insights that we can develop, what's the kind of messaging to address those kind of insights, to develop these campaigns that maybe are more like flight-based campaigns that last a quarter or something like that. And really elevating top of the funnel kind of campaigns that are much more creative, much more engaging. So everyone then becomes, there aren't really these pure service functions. Everyone's trying to drive the strategy and contribute strategically as well. Yes, so this is what it looks like. Again, very long-winded.
It's a lot.
Just to try and push you to appreciate the amount of thinking that goes into this kind of stuff. A few dotted lines, also the growth product. So this is like the product team that's developing funnels, etc., and also working on the website, maybe A/B testing, etc. And then also obviously to the sales organization as well. There needs to be a strong connection directly through the CMO ideally, but also probably through sales ops operations team as well.
Can we touch? So that was the wider marketing team with like an established CMO, and maybe you've got like 20, 30 employees. Previously, we had the marketing director with maybe 10 to 15 employees, and then the marketing head with like 6 or 7. And then going back up in the graphic, we had the out-of-house team. So we had, again, you know, in the first bracket, in the smaller startup, 1 person with many hats, maybe 2 people with a hat each. And then moving forward to that kind of larger scale of startup, you also had the party hat, which we've not touched on yet. But that is kind of where we fall in some ways, I think, Humble&Brag. Maybe we can just touch on that. So if you're looking at expanding with an out-of-house team, a pool of people, in this graphic, we have, you know, 1 sun hat, so 1 videographer, maybe 2 editors or such in-house, and then you have, interestingly, the production managers (parentheses) and agencies (parentheses) around the IES. Just to hark back to that weird reference that we made earlier. And this is interesting because I think this looks like it could be quite an expensive option, but in actual fact, if you have this production manager and agency coming in, they're not there. They don't need to be on site the whole time because they will be expensive, but they don't need to be around the whole time. So maybe if they're setting, for example, a content strategy or looking at setting up systems and processes, maybe they're just coming in 2, 3, 4 times a year, once a quarter, once a half, and then the rest of the people can work and operate on and execute on that vision and that strategy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, at some point, depending on how this looks, I mean, it can look, it can be quite different. Like if it's an agency like ours, then literally this could be a substitute, basically a fractional YouTube team that comes in and does everything end to end, and you don't really need someone in-house focusing on YouTube entirely.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, it can be a team that comes in, like a fairly standard kind of production agency that comes in and works on specific projects and delivers those. I did that a fair bit at Babbel, for example, where we brought in an agency on a brief, and then they delivered a whole series for YouTube. And some of those were super successful. Again, it's the typical struggle to kind of keep it on brand, so to speak. And at that time, we weren't so disciplined about it. But it was definitely effective in driving the growth of the channel and performance as well. Or it could be, like, I mean, it doesn't have to be this agency. It could also be, because you have now a lot of people involved, just managing, like this kind of project management, personal people management, or process management in a way, then I think you can make everything a lot more efficient if you have a good project manager behind it as well.
Absolutely.
And it could be working across a few different domains. That project manager could be working with the creative team plus the social team, for example.
Yeah.
And this, I think, brings me back to this point that I made earlier. The reason that I group these things under brand is because at this point, there is so much to be gained from working with the skill set and the other teams. So you have this YouTube team, which is obviously quite a few people creating probably a really high volume of content. A lot of that can then be reused even for ads and things like that, or like longer form YouTube pre-rolls and things like that. And also when you have this size of organization, just maintaining that consistency across marketing is super, super important in order to have the long-term kind of impact and this kind of basically this identity, this company identity. And I think the only way that you actually maintain that is by having this one person or this small group of people that are essentially given that responsibility, that accountability for maintaining the consistency.
Absolutely.
And developing the messaging and everything. And that is then the brand team. I stayed away from it as long as possible, but basically that is then the brand team. And I think that's kind of probably not the only way. You can do a lot through, you know, maintaining fantastic internal documentation, all that kind of stuff, but basically you need this person that's accountable for it.
I switched off when you said documentation there for a second.
Everyone does, unfortunately.
I mean, this is a really effective way to look at it with this graphic. I want to kind of quiz you. So we've kind of gone through the various budgets, the various team sizes and scales of company that would have these different requirements. Maybe you could just briefly talk to, based on your own experience and our shared last roles. It was probably in this kind of third column with the CMO and the vision was this kind of brand and performance split. Maybe just in terms of budgets, you're in charge of how you spend this budget, and maybe looking at 100K a year for marketing, $1 million a year for marketing, and 5 million a year for marketing. I mean, that's quite excessive, but like if you're leading a team and you have that budget, who would your hires be? and then maybe sort of spreading that across, maybe got the startup, maybe the small to medium sized business, and then the more established, larger company. How would you kind of split this based on the roles and everything we've said for 100,000, 1 million, 5 million?
Okay.
Spend wisely.
So I think things are potentially changing a little bit because of, and I hate to say it, but because of AI and because of the how efficient content production can potentially become. Definitely not there yet, but it's definitely also going in that direction a little bit. I'll just say that to preface what I'm about to say. On the performance side, generally you could keep it small and senior, which basically means you could have like one person behind paid social who's doing a huge amount of distribution there, but really focusing on Meta, for example. Because if you have someone that's senior, they can work very, very quickly within the interfaces. And they might get a little bit frustrated with the kind of more menial work of uploads and stuff. But either they can have someone that's junior working alongside them to do that kind of work, or they can find modes of or methods of automation as well. So that performance is kind of small and senior. And then on the brand or content production side, then you have a bit more of a mixture. So you have the kind of strategist that has a track record of growing a blog or growing a YouTube channel or growing social accounts, something like that. And then they're probably working with a group of editors in-house, maybe out of house, that are, again, doing that more kind of manual work and gaining, hopefully, as well, alongside it, the experience that the strategist has learning from that person as well. And maybe in the future moving up to that position. Or maybe kind of moving into a more senior position where they're managing a group of editors, for example. So in terms of budgets...
I should say the budgets are purely for salary, not for marketing spend or maybe performance spend.
Exactly. And then for the salaries, then you're kind of looking at a smaller salary in total on the performance side because you have fewer people. But per person, it's a higher average salary. And then on the production side, yes, you're investing quite a lot of salary, but you're also really building for the future. One, because the content is going to continue performing. Even if you were to switch off all your paid budgets, you're still going to have a lot of traffic, conversions, etc., coming from that content. And because when it comes to how you are spending the entire budget, so to bring in the distribution budget, you're obviously spending a lot on the performance side because you're giving all your money to Google and Meta. And on the organic side, the distribution costs are maybe even zero, right? Or as close to zero as you can get, maybe. And so it kind of balances out in that respect. And then as I see it evolving in the future, then maybe the editing work is reduced because of being able to cut a lot of stuff with AI, repurpose stuff with AI or with different tools like Descript or Veed and all those kinds of things. So maybe it does reduce a little bit, but then to be honest, what we'll probably see is just an increase in the volume of content that companies are creating. And then it could become a bit of a race to the bottom, and we'll probably see, to be honest, again, those just the high quality stuff floating to the top. And if you can do, obviously a high quality volume, then you're gonna win. You have that speed and quality together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it answers the question for the 100K. So in terms of salary split, you're looking at maybe if you were to divide that up between the roles, I would imagine 60 to 70% of that 100K would go on the performance.
Exactly.
And then,
I mean, salary-wise, then I'd switch it the other way, like 30% on the performance side, 60, 70. You just like split it in half. Going to the content production, brand, organic.
For one role?
For the whole organization. So like 60, 70% is going, maybe 70% is going on the organic side, so to speak, and 30% of the salary is going on the performance side.
So this performance marketer is going to be paid 30K?
No. So like you have a whole team. Like, if you have 2 people, then no, that wouldn't be the case. But like if you have a whole team, you got 3 people in the performance, 7 people in the content.
I was focusing solely on that 100,000.
All our maths is getting a bit wonky now because I know that I said the performance people will probably have a high average salary, but you know what I mean.
Perfect. Okay, cool. And then so we covered the 1 million spend.
Maybe 1 million, then the salary, even at this stage. So I'm guessing the salaries at this stage for the kind of company that we're talking, it's not going to be a million. but I think it's fairly accurate to say that you would have a total salary amount for the entire company of around 500,000, and your performance or your marketing budget could definitely be around 500,000 at that stage. And then marketing team, like I said, is kind of a third of that. So I'm guessing that would be 200K, something like that, 150, 200K salary for the entire marketing organization. Yeah. So it's like 700K that you're managing on a monthly basis if you'd state like all the operating costs and everything.
Damn. I feel like we went deep on this one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole other topic.
It's like 4 podcasts in one.
The evolution of a marketing organization. But I think, this is interesting for me to kind of get your perspective, having been in that YouTube team and seeing it evolve across different companies, and then to compare that to my view of developing that organization and trying to obviously make it as effective and efficient organization as possible. Yes, but if I were to do it again, then it would probably look quite similar to this. Would be the kind of end product. And then it'd be a case of obviously like finding the opportunities and building niche teams up around those opportunities.
Yeah, and we'll add this graphic in as a downloadable for the podcast audio as well. Like if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, we can add this in the bio, so you can download it and see what the hell we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Same on YouTube. We'll put it in the link below, and you can download it. And if you're growing a marketing team or a YouTube team, then hopefully it will be useful.
Maybe there's some hats that we've missed. Maybe you can add in some creative hats.
And a hat emoji.
Oh, hat emoji in the comments. But yeah, maybe we can round off there. I think this has been a really nice deep dive. It's something we wanted to talk about for a while. Super interesting. But anything else you want to add?
No, I'm hungry.
I'm hungry too.
I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. So I think we'll leave it there. Let us know if you have any questions. What else can they do? They can
like and subscribe. If
like and subscribe. YouTube. Obviously, you can join our community for YouTube strategists, charmingly named Humbleweed, where you can drop us messages, ask us about exactly this kind of thing, and we'll get straight back to you. Yeah. It's becoming a bit of a thriving community for YouTube strategists. So if you want to come help the thrive,
then help the thrive.
Join the help the.
We always do this at the end of the podcast. It just
gets a bit blurry.
It gets a bit meta. Yeah. But cool. Let's come on a date. Let's go get some food.
Yep. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you.